make the process very successfully. You can hear me?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Proceed.
What I'm saying is knowledge management of this day, knowledge management of the time of Mzee, and knowledge management of route to error is worlds apart. Governance is how state institutions, how government are arranging, managing, using their institutions that are dealing with the information to ensure that there is accountability, there is transparency, there is responsive, good governance. We need to pause again and to make sure that we are all on the same direction when we talk about good governance. Our biggest asset in Africa is our human minds, is our human resources. We need to take care of them, to enable them to give us good service, to enable them to make sure that our document, our knowledge is properly and safe stored. Our institutions, let us useful our institutions on our continent and in the world to properly make sure that our structures of knowledge management are in place. The knowledge are in place, information are stored, are safe, are made accessible to the public, to the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Everyone is stakeholder. The people on the ground, the masses, the politician, the business people, the health workers, our libraries, these are all stakeholders. We must make sure that are always on the same page all the time, and they are happy in their work too, to enable them to make sure that our documents are safe. Dear participants, knowledge management is vital for informed decision. For us to make informed decision in our respective institutions, in our governments, in our libraries, in our municipalities, in our universities, we need to be well informed. And you can only be well informed if you are also reading information, look up for the information, and so on. We should also promote culture of you can hear me still?
Yeah, that's an echo, but it's fine.
Yeah, we should have a culture of promoting exchange of good practice in the world. The politicians like me and others, for us to do well, we need to be knowledgeable. And knowledgeable can only be achieved if we are looking up our places where there's knowledge. If we are taking care of our human resources who are taking care of our knowledge information. Let us manage our information and knowledge properly. Let us invest in our institutions. Let us restore our institutions. Let us, as I said, pay well our institutions and our human resources so that they do a better job. We need to get stakeholders on board. Everybody must be on board. All the CEO of companies, the NGOs, the community, the village chiefs, the parliamentarians, the politicians. We need to push in the same direction all the time. We need to be on the same page. We need to know where are we taking Africa. We have a proverb that says, if we want to go far, we need to go together. I want now to make a little bit of more practices as a practical librarian. You see this book. we need, before I come to the book, you see, for example, in Nairobi, there is archives in the Tom Mboya Street. People of all stakeholders need to visit these archives to see what's happening there. They need to visit our libraries in Nairobi. This book is in the library. Illusion of Power. If the politicians are not reading the information we are giving them in our libraries, they might not understand, they might not learn from politics of yesterday. This is important book for every politician, that illusion of power. The other information I want to share is corruption. This all information are in the book. It's a corruption, so they know what's corruption about. The other information is, this is a very important and notable personality in Kenya. Get this book and read what happened to him. When he was in service, when he was in charge, he didn't take care of the officials, and the official taught him a lesson after he retired. Read this book, is in the library in Nairobi. This book, it's an important book. I repeat again, we need to learn from the information we are getting. This book will teach you some lessons from your practical history. It's in the library. The recent election, Raila Odinga is an important personality in Kenya. Our young people need to understand where we are coming from to appreciate our political scene in our country. Also, the politician must also not learn, they must learn never to eat alone. They must lead with the people on the ground. All the information are there. The politician must also use the opportunity to elevate poverty out of their countries. And they cannot do that if they don't have knowledge. Some of these books, this book is written by the president of China, Up and Out of Poverty. Our librarians, our knowledge protectors must also read about other books. Namibia is a founding father who is a good example of how he brought democracy in Namibia. All these books are in our libraries. Use them. There's another book I want also to share. Robert Greene. I bought this book in Ethiopia, by the way, in Nairobi. Robert Greene wrote a book. The other book I want everybody to know, especially those in politics, is 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. He wrote this book. And the other book is also The Laws of Human Nature. So what I'm trying to say in my conclusion is that we need to appreciate our knowledge management in our respective countries. And we can also not keep on blaming the politician. Some of these politicians are just coming from a different background. We need to empower them. We need to empower them, but when they come in power, they must also make sure that they empower, they make resources available for our libraries, for our archives, so that the knowledge and information are protected. And I wish you a good day and good work ahead. Thank you very much.
Oh. Thank you so much, Ambassador. It's a powerful presentation, and I was almost thinking like you're talking to the Kenyans in the house, coming from election and talking about the governance. I think we've sort of achieved. I'll open the floor for comments on the presentation. I'd seen Dr. Subed. Of course, usually guest speakers, we don't do much, but it's a privilege when we have an ambassador in the house. And as we ask the ambassador questions, of course, things to do with eating as Africans, how do we change that? We'll take questions, we'll take comments, and then after that, before we lose the ambassador in the house, we'll give the next direction. Dr. Subed, so your hand was up. The rest of us, please use your emoji. Use the emoji so that you can raise your questions. Dr. Betts?
Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful presentation. It's really, really good. At least it's part of what we make us to know more in Africa about knowledge management and good governance, which can progress Africa in general. Sir, in your discussion, you said that many people don't know about knowledge management and good governance. In this case, I think through this, your paper, there is need to write something on it so that it can be distributing between information, library and information center in all Africa countries, so that people will be aware more about how the knowledge, both the physical and the abstract, can be used to govern individual, to govern organization, to govern institution, and to rules in all ramifications in Africa, so that Africa can be more developed and we can live to expectation. So that we can equally eradicate poverty, and people will be more useful, and people will know how to reach their capacity. That is one. Then secondly, now you still talk about the reading materials, that there is kind of materials that are sharing within Namibia. This kind of information materials supposed not to be limited to Namibia, sir. It's supposed to be distributed within African countries so that people can know how to manage the knowledge in progressing African country. Not only to even limit it to the country in which one comes from, but if you are able to actualize the knowledge, it can be of benefit to the country of each individual and extend to all other African countries. Thirdly, Sam, we talk about the need. We need to go together far. That is African country. If you want to go far in Africa, we need to go together so that we can move far. Yes, sir. I concur with you with this very statement, because this kind of Information Africa Organization e-workshop that we are doing is part of it. We are learning. We are giving what we have, and we are sharing knowledge among ourselves here. Sir, the knowledge we are gaining here is supposed not to limit to us. We're supposed to share it so that all other people in Africa continent and even beyond can benefit from this very knowledge. Sir, in talking of knowledge management and good governance, I suppose if knowledge is properly managed, the issue of poverty, the issue of corruption, the issue of illiteracy will be eradicated in Africa. Let me further more by saying that if the library and information centers are able to organize user education, that is training for the library users, it will sensitize them of the resources or information materials they can use to brush their knowledge. Not only that, if you are talking about the library users, many people will be thinking that it's only people that are literate, that's people that can read and write, that can make use of these very information materials. No. It's supposed not to be limited to people that can read and write alone. But the illiterates, people who believe that they cannot read and write, can also be part of it. And we cannot call them totally illiterate because it's only that they cannot read and write in Western way, but they are also literate to their local environments. If there is a program in library that can bring these people together and sensitize them on how the knowledge can be useful, at least everybody has the intuitive knowledge. The intuitive knowledge, if the kind of program can be organized and this kind of intuitive knowledge can be bring out from these people we refer to as illiterates, it can be of help to governments in African countries to know how to plan and make budgets for the people in each of their country. By doing so, there will be progress. There will be eradication in poverty. There will be cuts in corruption, and people will be able to use their knowledge in accordance to the way that's going to be benefits to the general society in Africa at large. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Sister Nerissa, for giving me the opportunity to make my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you take it up, Doctor,
can I respond?
Excellency, before you respond, I want to, I've seen the hand from Namibia because most of these questions will tie to Sarah. I would want Sarah to make a comment also, and I think I needed to have started with Namibia first because you're speaking for Namibia. Let's take those two first, then we'll respond, then we'll pick the next set of questions.
Okay.
Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I just want to congratulate Ambassador for the good presentation, and then for me, just a brief contribution, where I would want to say knowledge management is indeed a proactive tool, as it allows institutions to organize, store, and use their information, which will promote effectively sharing of knowledge. It is also allowing us to create a philosophy which significantly improve efficiency and employee happiness. So now good governance coupled with knowledge management deliver an effective knowledge management system which rationalize company knowledge, which is also making it accessible to the whole organization. And then when it comes to good governance, when it comes now to records management, if we emphasize in proper records management, I'm sure we can ensure that the citizens and the institutions have proper documentations of records of their countries. And also it allows continuity of business. So we need to put an emphasis there in proper records management. And then Dr. Zubert said something also that captured my attention when she said we need to, in library sectors and information centers, we need to bring in a component where we make sure that we implement user education for library and archive users, whether they are literate or illiterate. So it's a call for us that are in the library sector, in the archives, in the information sector, to make sure that we include some of these programs that are suggested by the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we get comments? Then we'll take the next set of questions. Ambassador, Excellency,
thank you from the colleague from Nigeria and my colleague Sarah. Is this what I was saying? We are all on the same page. We must make sure that we are all on the same page. That's why I say we must pause and make sure that we understand the same thing. We must learn from history, library exchanges. Now, the other colleagues were talking about exchange of information. We are living in the digital era. That can be done. That's why institutions like your institution are doing well by linking up all the countries in Africa. This is a start. And there's no question why we cannot exchange information via digital. It can be done. Namibia already digitalized most of its document, and if the documents are public, you can always talk to Namtenya or Sarah or the director there. What I'm saying is that we, in Africa, we just need to make sure that our libraries are also linked to each other. And not only libraries, our information and knowledge institutions are linked to each other so that we can exchange information all the time. And I also want the colleagues to do what we call a visit to respective countries to learn from their best practices. My colleagues are very diplomatic. Namibia is doing well. We even use donkeys to take live books to the village. So you can come and learn from us. So we are not, that's why I'm saying the politician must make sure that they fund these institutions, because these institutions are the most important part of our institutions. Our knowledge information centers are the most powerful institution of our countries. That's why they need to be well funded to enable us to have the latest information users, to have our information protected and not get away by what I'm saying is they are secure. So what I'm saying is that we are speaking the same language. We need to make sure that everybody is brought on board, and most importantly, let's make our stakeholders, especially our human resources in these institutions, happy, so they can work happy and bring improvement to our institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Any other questions for the Ambassador? Comments? I'll take the last set of questions and comments for the Ambassador. Anyone? If you have a comment for countries who've not spoken, I'll give opportunity to Kenya. I'll give opportunity to Ghana and Sierra Leone in the house. Anyone from those countries who wants to make a comment? Anyone wants to make a comment from those countries? The countries I've mentioned? Especially Kenyans, you know, we used to have a camel-based library. I don't know if it's still there for the librarians in the house. I don't know if it's still there or it collapsed. Regina, Kenya, do you want to make a comment? Belfast, Kenya. Seems to be a lot of poor networks. Thank you. If I'm not getting any comment from Kenya and no comment from the other countries in the house, we'll move to the next direction. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Of course, please don't leave, because before we take the shot of the day, I noticed that our senior colleague was so much with the spearheader of this caravan is already in the house. And I'll request that Dr. George, I was also we noticed that Professor Detimir has been trying to log in. Issues of challenges in terms of connectivity in Africa is an issue which we need to address if we have to achieve the Africa we want of 2063. Dr. George in the house, sir, do you want to make your comments? And of course, I know it's a bit late for you to welcome the Ambassador, but would still appreciate if you did that, sir. Please proceed, Dr. George.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nerissa. First of all, I want to apologize most profoundly for missing what from the question and answer session must have been one of the most interesting presentations by His Excellency the Ambassador, Dr. Kayamo. I do hope my apologies are accepted. Secondly, if that be the case, I would also wish to recognize the countries that are currently in this e-workshop with us as of now. I want to recognize Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Senegal, Lesotho, Namibia, Eswatini, Sierra Leone, and of course, Kenya. And if there's anybody from this very nice sounding name of this country, Eswatini, please tell me how it is pronounced. It sounds very, very interesting. Delegates and Your Excellency, the Governor, the Ambassador,
Sorry.
knowledge management and good governance, I think you must have talked about political and institutional processes and outcomes that are necessary to achieve the goals of development. Going through your biography, you seem to have a very well-grounded background in terms of knowledge management. I have seen that you are a veteran of the independence struggle, just like Kenya and many countries. And I do know that Kenya did play a major role in your country's struggle. And you have been a diplomat in the Soviet Union. I may be repeating this, you may have shared this with the delegates. And you're the founding chairman of the Namibian Library, which is the very reason why you are with us. And being a member of parliament in terms of your legislative roles, oversight and representation. And thereafter being a deputy minister of Home Affairs of Namibia. And between 2016 up to now, you are ambassador to China. I'm assuming that. Correct me if I am wrong. I just wanted to share a few of my thoughts in terms of what is going to be a very lively discussion throughout. We do know that when we are talking about good governance, it includes identifying a vision so that we are talking about a future. It is futuristic. And when we look at the 21st century, especially when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, in which you are talking about issues of robotics, issues of digitalization. And I'm happy that you have indicated Namibia has gone that direction. But the challenges that we are facing, and I think Nerissa did allude to it, that you can use donkeys or camels in terms of mobile libraries. And I think Kenya had a very vibrant mobile libraries using camels, if I'm not wrong. I think that is something that Nerissa, you will share. So that we are looking at the future in terms of the vision that we do have. And after looking at the vision, we developed a strategy which helped us to reach the vision that we want. This caravan delegates, you do know, had a vision, and I must congratulate once again Nerissa for putting up this. It started with a very few of us. I don't know what the number is as of now, but I'm imagining that almost half or 3/4 of Africa are on board of this knowledge management caravan. Having developed a strategy, you then select and support a leadership to deliver that strategy. And on we are tapping into the leadership of Africa. And Your Excellency, the ambassador, you are part of that leadership that would like you to be our representation at the political level and also at the ambassadorial level, so that you can bring on board most of your colleagues to be with us in this very critical area of knowledge management. Having selected the leadership and supporting the leadership, the assurance that progress is being made must come out so that the citizenry know that they are being represented and that the knowledge that they do possess are put into good use. And the stewardship of the resources, and here the resources are not only financial, we are talking about resources in terms of land, we're talking of resources in terms of technology, in terms of time, and of course, finance and the human capital, which we do have in abundance. We just need to add value so that we exploit the resources that we have. And we then look at guardianship of quality and safety. In terms of mentorship, we do want to mentor a young and upcoming specialists in information, and especially the information age. And all this should be done to the highest standards of probity and transparency. The issue is that we are talking about not only governance, but we are talking about good governance. And I think if we can anchor our discussion around those few areas that I have talked about, it would be a very interesting discussion. I don't want to preempt what the other speakers from the program is a very rich menu that has been put by Information Africa Organization. And that is our colleagues, and especially Nerissa, in coming up with this very exciting menu of thematic areas. Otherwise, mine was to welcome you on board. And I think one of the challenges that Africa faces is access sometimes to internet connectivity. That is understood, and I do hope that we will be working towards Africa having access. Otherwise, feel very much welcome, and hope and wish you a very good discussion as the day rolls over. Over to you, Nerissa.
Thank you so much, Dr. George. And for colleagues, I'd said that Dr. George is one of the senior colleagues who are spearheading this. The last time I said it's not Nerissa, it's not my team, which includes Millicent, Tilsi, Biegon. It's about Dr. George, Dr. Jama, and Professor Ditsimere pushing us to what's this. Ambassador, I don't know if you'd want to comment, especially the part of you bringing on board other ambassadors and policy level colleagues.
Yeah, no, I'm humbled, but the responsibility should be collective and also should be also directed. The colleague in these institutions should start in their respective countries to talk to the relevant people, to bring them on board. Then we take it from there. If every country information of officials who are protecting our information, they need to have the courage, they need to have the responsibility to link up with the relevant institutions in their respective countries. But they must also make sure they understand the Africa we want in terms of Vision Africa 2063 agenda. So that they know how do they link in this agenda, and we take it from there. The ambassadors of their countries are there, so they need to link up from there. I linked up where I am because of my colleagues home, who keep me on my feet all the time, and who brought me to these institutions too. What I'm saying is that I'm ready to talk to my colleagues here and see how we can push in the same direction. Rest assured that I'm, as a full soldier of Namibia Library Council, I am always ready, all the time, 24/7, to bring my part. So, and my colleagues are also on this page in the lesson. So, so I'm saying the other colleagues, like you and others, must make sure that they link up with the relevant institutions in their countries, especially the politicians. We need the politicians to talk loud in parliament about libraries, about archives, about network in schools, network in the village. So we can only do this if we are pushing the same direction. And as my president said, we must play the ball. We must play the ball, not the person. Because I see you people in Kenya are always playing the person, not the ball. You must play the ball. Play the ball. Play the ball. My president, Dr. Kaingop, is saying we must play the ball, not the person. And see how best we can push in the same direction. That's all I want to say. And also, we must not underestimate our values as people. Everybody has a value to add to the bigger picture of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ayman Egypt, do you have a comment? I'm seeing your hand is straight up for so long. Dr. Ayman? Egypt, Dr. Ayman? Dr. Ayman? Subet, just a quick one so that we take the next direction. Dr. Subet, your hand is up. Do you want to make another quick comment? Yes, Subet.
Thank you very much for giving me another opportunity on this. And I want to thank the presenter, Dr. George, for this good presentation. My submission on it is that the presenter talked about the fusion. That is one of the good knowledge management and governance is to have good vision for the future so that strategy can be developed for proper management. And when he was talking on that, he made mention of using of innovation, that is robotic and artificial intelligence. In my own view, it's like this very knowledge management of a team and good governance he discussed, he tailored it towards the literate people, as I said earlier on. If you're talking about the innovation, you're talking about the robotic and artificial intelligence. The local people cannot make use of this robotic. Talk less of knowing what artificial intelligence is. If we really want to have the good vision, it is better we carry along these very local people so that they will know that they are not just ordinary people. They have to have knowledge in them. And if the knowledge in them can be utilized, it can contribute to the good governance, which can project African country. When you talk about this very robotic work with intelligence, that is brain of artificial intelligence. The cooperation of this very artificial intelligence with robotic is what makes this very robotic to become useful machine that we can use as our resources for good knowledge management. We can use it in terms of health. We can use it in terms of agriculture. We can use it in terms of education. and so on and so forth like this. But I believe it's only people that are literate that can see be of use to this very robotic. I hope you get me clear. You make mention of fusion, and you said that through that, African country can develop a strategy for good plan. You now make mention of by using by digitizing our library, the information resources can be shared among the African countries. And also by utilizing of robotic. But robotic is not something that everybody can just utilize. What about the local people that cannot make use of the library as they want, and that cannot make use of the innovation that is robotic and artificial intelligence? How can we incorporate them into this kind of knowledge management and good governance? And how can our library be part of organization that can create awareness of this kind of knowledge so that local people can equally gain?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That is my submission.
Dr. James. Thank you. Before I take that, perhaps if he has a response to that, we'll take the first shot of the day as we digest that. I don't know, Dr. Ayman, you enrolled up Ayman Egypt. Or do you want to make a comment? Of course, on the chat, there are a lot of complimentaries. Dr. Ayman, please, your chat.
Hello, my dear sister.
Hello.
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 Just I wanted to comment about leadership in education. Nothing will be done without changing the educators to be better. And also, we need to focus on infrastructures in all countries. So no advancement without rebuilding our infrastructures, and network issues, problems must be solved. I'm so sorry because I am in the way, but I wanted to be in. So thank you very much. And the keywords are globalization in education and being online to the globe, and also leaderships and establishment of leaders in education, very well training programs for educators, and so on. Thank you very much. I am very happy to be with you, and this is what I have. Thank you again.
Thank you, colleagues. Switch on your videos for the first shot of the day. Please, all of us, switch on your videos. We take the first shot of the day. It's kind of a roll call. Videos on, please. We take the first shot of the day. Yeah, shots, Faith, Sarah, Namibia, Florence. Namatanya, videos on. As we switch on the videos, I acknowledge a few colleagues who've joined in. Deronke, say hi to us as we switch on the videos. Deronke. Those of you who don't have videos, just relax. The rest of us, we smile. We acknowledge Deronke. We acknowledge Dr. Wilson. Please switch on the videos. Deronke, say hi quickly.
That's right.
Dr. Sole's video.
All right. My video is on.
Videos. These are very few videos on page 1. Please switch on your videos. I want to see your faces. Faces. Page 1, faces, Dr. Margaret. Jeremiah. Dr. Jeremiah in the house. Switch on your video. Her face has been lost for so long. Regina, I can see. Sierra Leone video. Dr. Margaret, please sit. I want to take the first part. We want to take this page 1. There are very few faces here. One face, Dr. Florence, Sarah, Namibia, Dr. Margaret. We acknowledge Dr. Wilson, Namibia, in the house already, and we acknowledge Dr. Seula, Lesotho. Videos. What's happening here? I can't see faces. Faces. Patani, your face? Are you ready? I cannot see our photo man, so it has to be Regina. take shots
No
of the
problem.
day. Better?
Having a problem with my camera.
You're having a problem with your camera, so we can't see your face.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, hold on. I think it's
No problem. We'll just take. Regina, we're ready. You want to take the shot?
Larissa,
Yeah.
guide me through. I'm using a different gadget today.
Okay, I'll just help you. I'll get you through later, so a lot of time. People of page 2, smile at the camera. Page 2, guys. Tell you the names of page 2. The surface I'm not seeing here. Dr. Jeremiah, hello. Nice to see you. Lots of you know the relationship between Nerissa and the son, Dr. Jeremiah. We're happy to have you in the meeting. Who else is missing on page 2, please? Page 2. Right. Well, Kenya. Thank you very much. I'm just taking the last shot of page 1 again, so that I'm sure everybody is here. Page 1. Adetimere. Aderonke. That's a roll call. Thank you so much. Back to the program. Back to the program. Dr. Goodness in the house. Dr. Goodness in the house, sir? Dr. Goodness in the house. From the program, we have at least covered one. Dr. Kayema is done. The next speakers in no order would be Dr. Goodness Osha, Senior Lecturer, Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Babcock University. We'll be talking about indigenous knowledge production and governance in Africa. If it is the house, that's fine. If it's not in the house, we'll take up the next speaker. Dr. Sele, Head of Information and Resource Management, National University of Lesotho, Library, Lesotho. This topic is bridging organizational cultural differences using communication to retain knowledge in the cross-border mergers of telecommunication industry in Lesotho. This is going to build up to the previous discussions. So, sir, Dr. Osha in the house, you can proceed if you're ready. Doctor in the house? Dr. Osha. Dr. Jeremiah, is Dr. Osha in the house?
Yes, I think he's online. Let me get across to you.
Yeah, if it's not, if he has challenges, you can pick up the next speaker. Please confirm if he's in the house. As we wait for confirmation, we acknowledge Umar South, Sierra Leone. Thank you for joining. I think I've acknowledged the rest of us in the house. Dr. from Lesotho in the house. As wait for the confirmation. As wait for the confirmation from Dr. Jeremiah, if we can get him. Perhaps we could pick in a few more discussions from the morning, like any further contribution to what was discussed. Want to see what, especially the Kenyans, want to know what happened to the Camel project as we wait for Dr. Oso and the other doctor to join back. I would want to hear from the Kenyans in the house what really happened to the Camel library. Yeah.
Nerissa.
Yes, sir.
I think Dr. Osa have an issue with his audio. He sent a message on the WhatsApp, on the platform, the Zoom chat link.
I can see, yeah.
So perhaps the next presenter can continue, then he
is telling me that his laptop is misbehaving. Thandika in the house? Dr. Thandika in the house? Thandika? As we wait for that, can we pick? Can we hear the story of Kenya and the Camel library? What really happened? Zuena, Regina, let's know what happened to the Camel in Kenya. Yes, Regina, you're muted. The Camel Library, which was being run by the Kenya National Library Services. Yes.
Yeah, Nerissa, I'm not very sure on what happened. Someone joked around that the camel died, but I think that was not an excuse. So at the point, I think the support went low in the regions where it was being elevated, and then there was no much push to entice the people around the region. So it is the effort of the librarians, the community, the personnel who are in charge. I think they got reluctant, and the laxity that may have killed it along the way. So it was the support, the management and support, which now through this forum, I hope we can be able to go back and try to elevate it. I think it was not in all regions. The others were doing a mirror of the same, not using the camel exactly, but they were doing a mirror of the same. So it can be revived if we do something from our endpoints on a personal level. So it just needs a personal level, like sacrifice. Put forward what you think you can work. You as an individual, if I do it, you do it. Anyone else comes and do it. Then at the end of the day, we can have something starting up or picking up and moving forward. So I think basically from my end, that's what I think happened: the laxity of the management and the support of the community.
Thank you. So the camel died. Correct.
Yeah, I think that's why they said the camel died. Yeah.
Okay. No, but I think from what the ambassador has said, we have a lot of information professionals, and for me, it's not just the camel died, it's the librarians. We have to be a bit innovative. Luckily, we have Dr. Selo in the house. Because of challenges of networks, I think we'll just move straight to his presentation. And I've introduced him, that is the head of information and resource management, National University of Lesotho, and he's talking about bridging organizational cultural differences using communication to retain knowledge in the cross-border mergers of the telecommunication industry in Lesotho. Sir, you ready? Take it up. Dr. Selo, yeah.
Yes,
And
Nerissa,
let
how are you and colleagues?
We're fine. And also, I've given you rights to share if you have a presentation.
Okay. Can colleagues see my presentation?
It's still loading up. Yeah. We can see it, sir.
Okay. Good morning, colleagues in Africa. How are you doing?
It's good. We're doing well.
Thank you very much, Nerissa. First of all, for the invitation to speak on this very, very important workshop. My name is Theole. I am Dr. Theole. As Nerissa has just introduced myself, I am the head of the department in the library called Information and Resources Management. I also happen to be the part-time lecturer at the National University of Lesotho's University under Humanities, and I teach knowledge management and indigenous knowledge systems. I'm trying to go straight to my second. Colleagues, can you still hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Africa is very quiet when it comes to learning.
It's because I had a problem on my side with I wanted to go to the presentation mode. I don't know what is happening now. Technology sometimes.
Yeah.
But as you can see, as you can notice from the screen there, a page that is displayed there is the outline of my research. Maybe I need to first note that or tell Africa that this research has been partly extracted from the bigger project that I did as a PhD study. And of course, it's important to also acknowledge that it was supervised by Professor Patrick Ngulube, as well as Professor Ngwako Maruta. I'm trying to play the, I don't know what is happening. I'm trying, if you could just bear with me, colleagues, I'm trying to display my slideshow, and now it's giving me problems. It's misbehaving. Let me do this. So yes, part of this research has been extracted from that bigger project. I'm trying to, yeah.
If it refuses to go to slide mode, just
yeah,
proceed.
something is just
if it refuses, just proceed.
No, it's here now.
Thank you.
I think it should now go. Something was hiding my slideshow presentation. And now my laptop is misbehaving again. Freezing. Africa, what is happening?
Those are the challenges we've been talking about. Can we look for a way of getting our own infrastructure in place?
Yes, I think, but this one is just my laptop. I don't think we need to blame it on Africa.
So the caravan should buy for you a new laptop on a light note.
Yeah, it's just my laptop.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Can you now see something?
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I'm now waiting for this slideshow. Can you see something now?
Yeah, sure.
Let me go to the next one. Oh my God, thank you very much. Wow, I was beginning to panic. So first of all, without wasting any time, I wanted to display the outline. Of course, number one will be the background of the study as well as the introduction, the contextual study setting in which the study is based, the literature review, the problem statement, the purpose of the research together with the objectives, the research methodology. I will briefly give you the findings of the study, and lastly, the proposed framework for this study. Nope. What's happening now? Okay. Okay, this study, the study was drawn from the knowledge retention model that has been created by Dawn et al. In 2012, as well as from the knowledge-based view of the FEM. This study intended actually to investigate a framework for bringing cultural differences using communication for knowledge retention in the cross-border measures of the telecommunication industry of Lesotho. In other words, the study actually intended to develop a framework that is intended to make sure that cultural differences are bridged using communication in order to retain knowledge retention in the cross-border measures of the telecommunication industry of Lesotho. And we also have the case study there. So, but before we get there, culture is often cited as one of those key determining factors in knowledge retention. That is according to the listed authors there. For instance, Dube and Ngulube define organizational culture as those common norms that are espoused by the firm by learning to create a unique culture that identifies itself over a given period of time, which happens to be both tangibly and intangibly. So culture is also characterized by what we believe as the organization in terms of our norms, the values that are used by the organizational community in order to identify themselves among other organizations. So culture is said to originate whenever members of the group have shared enough conjoint experiences with each other. And on the context of the organizational level, culture comes about if there is adequate communal history. And to make organizations more efficient and effective, management must therefore decide on the facets of culture and the role that they believe culture will play in the organizational life. One author there, Hosede theory on culture characteristics states that countries value behaviors in different ways. This theory actually summarized about six cultural elements that significantly steer people's values and behavior. And those, number one, is the power distance index, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, the uncertainty avoidance index, the long-term orientation versus the short-term orientation, as well as the indulgence versus restraint. So it appeared from this theory that scholars found that of all those dimensions mentioned earlier, they found that collectivism was more related to knowledge transfer that happens, knowledge transfer activities that happens among employees in organizations. Kotopi further notes that in countries that value collectivism, knowledge sharing activities are widely accepted, are deemed as a collective norm. That is the countries that view that particular dimension of collectivism. They view or they perceive or they think or they see knowledge activities that they are accepted and are therefore deemed also as a collective norm. On the one hand, countries that value individualism, employees may be hesitant to share their knowledge. That is in contrast to the previous dimension. And according to Martin and Mayer and the rest of those authors there, they perceive knowledge retention as maintaining and not losing knowledge that exists in the minds of people. That is tacit knowledge, which is knowledge that is not easily documented, and knowing, which is experiential action manifestation in behavior. That is vital to organizational overall functioning. And according to the authors there, Dust et al., there is a risk of knowledge loss that is resulting from organizational inability to retain its knowledge, and that is knowledge that can affect the strategic as well as operational benefit of the organization. And that can also lead to loss of competitive advantage. As we know that one of the strategic ways in which knowledge can be used is to make sure that we achieve the competitive edge over other organizations. It is therefore very important to make sure that knowledge of organization, knowledge of employees living is actually retained. All measures need to be
Dr. Dr. Sola, have we lost you? Dr. Selo? Regina, can you hear me? Hello? Who's in
Yes,
the house? You can hear me? Is
Yeah,
doctor
Nerissa,
on?
I can hear you.
Is the doctor still on or we lost him?
I think we've lost him.
Just dropped.
Maybe you could present off screen. Maybe it could work.
No, it's just dropped. His network just dropped.
All right.
His network just dropped. We can still pick up from the discussions which you've just shared. It's unfortunate that network is not on the side. Okay, so Subet, Dr. Subet, perhaps you could just keep discussing what the presentation is looking at in terms of the telecommunication, because I think already Dr. Sola is introducing the aspect of ICT to knowledge management. Or do you want to put your voice into that, Dr. Subet, and any other person for that, as we wait for him to come back? Yeah.
Sister Nerissa?
Yeah.
Give me, as you say something on that.
Yes, please, as we wait to see if he's coming back. Especially the issue of ICT, I know was moving towards a direction. Unfortunately, he got disrupted.
Okay. You know, in talking about the issue of information and communication technology today, we know the callings or demands from the 21st century now is shifting from traditional way of handling information to the modern ways of handling information. And of course, in line with this, the Information and Communication Center means to acquire resources, both human and materials, to achieve demands. We know, at an instance, the stage of the information collection and sharing is through hand in hand. And as time goes on, it's moved to the stage of the automation. That is a situation whereby the patrons of the library and information center can use the materials from the center by reading it from their screen, that is computer, or the slide projector can equally be used to share information.
You're also hanging. Thank you, Dr. Smith. You're hanging. We're back to Dr. Solo. Please pick it up from where you stopped. Dr. Sola, I'm sorry, there's a problem with connectivity in Kenya, in Africa. I mean. Proceed, sir.
I'll try to and I must apologize, colleagues, that I think I was on knowledge retention. Is that the case?
Yeah, please proceed.
I was actually on the success of knowledge retention programs, and I was saying that let me. Sorry, I want to know what is happening now. Sorry. Okay, I was on the issue of knowledge retention programs, which I was saying of course, as much as they are important, but their success all depends on the organizational culture. And I was saying that becomes even more complicated in the context of different cultures, such as the case of where organizations decide to merge in the context of cross-border. I must mention, therefore, that researchers on this issue of organizational measures and acquisitions have argued that much of the organizational or acquisition failures are often due to the problems of combining different organizational cultures and workforces, especially during the integration phase of the merger. And that is according to the quoted authors there. Bockman and other authors in that case argue that the clashes that seems to be happening or are evident in organizational values and practices versus which happens between them or us versus them. That is the thinking among the employees in the merging organizations may lead to lack of cooperation and failed opportunities for inter-unit learning. Culture apparently is seldom considered until after the process of mergers and acquisitions, once the deal or once the negotiators assume that their deal is finalized. Nonetheless, because culture clashes are repeatedly blamed for the collapse of those mergers and acquisitions, it is therefore essential that organizations should have an ambiguous understanding of their own culture at the beginning of the process, when the mergers and acquisition is a prime component of their expansion strategy. The context of this study. So the contextual setting of the current study is Econet Telecom Lesotho, which happens to be the two organizations that came together. So ETL, or Econet Telecom Lesotho, is a resultant organization after the merger that took place between the former Telecom Lesotho, which was owned by the government of Lesotho, as well as Econet EasyCell Lesotho in April 2008. Econet EasyCell Lesotho, which was another company, was another independent company, happened to be a diversified communications group of companies that was owned privately, and it operated in different countries, including Africa, as well as other continents. So this merger between these two organizations has therefore allowed the new entity, which is now called ETL, Econet Telecom Lesotho, to provide both the fixed and mobile services using one license. The merger between these organizations has also allowed the new entity to enhance its customer commitment by offering the newest services at affordable rates, and to draw new clientele with the groundbreaking products and offerings. That was our context of this study. Colleagues, are you still with me?
Please proceed. I was muting this loud entries.
So I'm now going to the preliminary literature review on which the study is based. And I have two headings there. The first one being the role of organizational culture in retaining knowledge in the cross-border measures and acquisitions. And the first point there is about Obek and Taba, who caution that organizational cultural differences normally accompany cross-border measures and acquisitions, actually encompass the capacity to amalgamate organizations that affect the transfer and retention of knowledge. So the loss of this very important knowledge can be particularly harmful for mergers and acquisitions in countries where personal relationships are highly valued. However, other empirical research on this very same idea seems to be inconsistent and contradictory. That is according to those authors there. For instance, Moroni and those other authors argue that mergers and acquisitions in culturally distant countries seems to be more helpful. One because a greater cultural difference makes it more likely that the target firm will have the capabilities or the skills that are considered diverse from the acquirer's own set. Thus, ceteris complementaries are more likely to exist. Rotin therefore observes that the permutation of various cultures in the context of cross-border mergers and acquisitions primarily takes place after the acquisition integration stage. That is when those two organizations are involved, which are involved in a merger, are now expected to kickstart the process of working together. So, but before the acquisition, an acquiring organization typically conducts the due diligence to determine the proper transaction price and payment method. So, but even though the financial aspect of mergers and acquisitions is perceived to be very normal and of great importance, a larger number of acquirers seems to not attach the very same importance of financial due diligence to cultural issues as part of their overall due diligence. So what is this cultural due diligence I'm talking about? Rotin defines or argue that cultural due diligence has to do with the verification of cultural compatibility in the context of cross-border mergers and acquisitions. Cultural compatibility does not necessarily mean cultural similarity. To say two cultures are compatible, it doesn't mean that they should be similar. But in contrast, it refers to whether the two cultures can actually be combined to make the organization or to make the integration process of the merger process more smooth. So according to Dennison and Co., they mentioned that cultural due diligence happens naturally, and that is immediately before the main decisions are taken or soon after the merger deal is closed. Fassi therefore argue that notwithstanding the increasing importance of the cross-border mergers and acquisitions around the world, research into the correlation between the different cultures and organizational performance is both incomplete and inconclusive. Cultural differences or variations themselves may not be regarded or understood as a problem to the success of mergers and acquisitions, and therefore to knowledge transfer. However, but how employees, or what is important to consider is how employees of the two meeting organizations or both the acquiring as well as the target company react is what may become the problem. So the problem of culture is not in its differences, but how the employees of the two merging organizations react. And it is said that that can actually become a problem. Okay, I'm going to the last. I'm going to the last component there under the preliminary literature review, which relates to the. Hello, colleagues.
Okay, just proceed. We are listening.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So the next point there under the preliminary review, which happens to be the last one, relates to the importance of communication in trying to bridge the cultural differences in the context of mergers and acquisitions. Also, the first point there goes when the news about the mergers and acquisitions emerge. A lot of emotions range from fear and confusion to acceptance and excitement. However, in order to allay this fear and confusion, the quoted authors there suggest that the pre-merger communication that is which realistically conveys the key merger goals and the integration strategies should be developed. So in the post-merger stage as well, communication remains a very important aspect in achieving post-attitudinal as well as behavioral outcomes, such as staff motivation and commitment. Similarly, Apellam and all those other quoted authors argue that from the beginning of the merger, that is at the pre-merger stage, communication does not only lessen the feelings of uncertainty, it also limits the likelihood of rumor mills, therefore thereby causing confusion on the forthcoming merger. As Asakafi, as well as Kramer, also highlight the importance of communications in mergers and acquisitions as they perceive it to enhance the trust between the management and the employees. It is therefore not surprising that Swega and Denisi, as well as Padaki, suggest that communication problems can actually undermine the commitment that is required for the effective implementation of mergers and acquisitions. So the problem statement, why do we think this study is actually worth undertaking? It's because the researchers have realized that organizations around the world, including those that are willing to undergo mergers and acquisitions, are normally faced with the issue of organizational culture. So one key challenge is that the cultural differences, which are most of the times difficult to solve without proper communication channels. So cultural differences in the organization usually disturb or interfere with the key goals and objectives of the organization. Therefore, service delivery and clients or customers are likely to suffer. Therefore, top management leadership of an organization should therefore take a preemptive approach and create a conducive environment in which which promotes a knowledge management culture among its employees. And so the purpose of this study was actually to investigate a framework for bridging cultural differences using communication in order to achieve the much needed knowledge retention, especially in the context of cross-border measures of the telecommunication industry in the Mountain Kingdom of Lesotho. And to attain the stated purpose, the study was based or had to follow the following objectives. Number one, to determine the role of organizational culture in the cross-border mergers and acquisitions. To establish the importance of communication in bridging cultural differences in the context of cross borders and measures. The last objective was to propose a framework that may be used to bridge cultural differences using communication in cross-border measures and acquisitions with the view to retaining organizational knowledge. So this research followed or adopted both the quantitative and qualitative research methods in a single case study design, which therefore enable multiple data collection methods. Using multiple data collection tools, which is popularly known as triangulation, enhances the validity of the study results. Data collection for this study was done through interviews and questionnaires. Qualitative data was gathered through or from purposefully selected staff members who occupied the leadership positions in the two organizations. So on the one hand, quantitative data was collected from about 14 staff members who went through the major process, as well as the other 14 former employees who left the organization for different reasons during the major process. Qualitative data was analyzed manually through content analysis. Quantitative data, on the one hand, was analyzed by the assistance of the SSP software version 17. So I now come to the summary of the study findings. The results of this study revealed that there were between these two merging organizations, there were visible cultural differences between the original organizations. So these organizations decided to come together to merge, but each one of them had different cultures. So these cultures, cultural differences were even noticeable at the managerial level. Furthermore, the study or the findings also point to the fact that those cultural variations or differences tended to impede or negatively affect knowledge retention among the staff members. As you can remember, one of the objectives for this current study was to propose a framework that may be used to bridge cultural differences between organizations. It's also important that this proposed framework may also be used in other measures, in other future measures, not only in organizations not only in organizations in the telecommunication industry. So at the top there, we see management of cultural differences in the context of cross-border measures. It's also important that all the concepts are brought together or are clued together using communication, which goes back to the issue of the topic of this study. So all these other concepts have been clued together using communication, and the intention down there, we notice, is to make sure that at the end of the day, we retain knowledge in organizations undergoing mergers and acquisitions. So the conclusion there, it is hoped that the proposed framework may be applicable not only to organizations in the telecommunication industry, but to organizations in other industries as well. It has been established in the study that cultural differences between organizations encumber or negatively affect the retaining of knowledge. This therefore shows the importance of considering culture in organizations undergoing mergers and acquisitions. It was also found that cultural due diligence should be afforded the same importance as the financial due diligence. As it has been noted from the figure, the foregoing figure there above, it proposes a framework of 4 stages which need to be followed sequentially in order to bridge those cultural differences and to retain knowledge. So consistent with the study findings, the proposed framework puts communication at the center of other stages of the major process. In fact, as it can be noted, the study results confirm that communication should be viewed as a glue that binds the whole measures together. Therefore, the absence of communication may lead to employees relying on any information that they may find, including the harmful rumors. And that, I think, brings me to the end of this presentation. Thank you very much, Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siolo. Of course, not the challenges you had. The presentation is extremely informative, and I know it will attract a lot of questions, especially from the teaching fraternity. But for me, what my take home is the organizing culture and its role in knowledge production, knowledge sharing, and knowledge utilization for improved service delivery. I'm not going to take questions for RIM because of the challenges of both the speakers. We'll take, please, if you have questions for Dr. Siolo, hold on to your questions so that we get Dr. Goodwill to do his presentation, because I think wherever he is now is able to put his presentation. But of course, I know there are quite a lot of discussions we picked, especially from the teaching fraternity from the last presenter. Dr. Jeremiah, is Dr. Goodwill right there? Dr. Jeremiah? Dr. Jeremiah in the house? Dr. Goodwill, and any questions? I want to take questions from the extreme end as we wait for this second presenter, the extreme end of Africa. Ghana, any colleague from Ghana, either Dr. Margaret or Dr. Florence from Ghana, as we get the second presenter in the house. Ghana, do you have a question for that? And then from Ghana, I'll take a question from South Africans in the house. Ghana. Dr. Margaret in the house? Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Do you have a comment? Because I'm just seeing Dr. Obina, it says that the next presenter is ready, but just take your comment, then we ask him to take up. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I just want to make a comment. I want to congratulate him for the presentation, and then I want to just say that I realize that good governance and information management covers the whole spectrum of corporate governance. So when he brought in the issue of telecommunications, I was very pleased, because you cannot govern without having access to information and without making good use of the information. And when it comes to corporate governance, it starts from all the different subject areas, from education through to health and all that. So for example, if we have our children going to school, how do we know the number of children to enroll if we don't have access to the information? And that's where telecommunications and IT will come in, where the relevant institutions are going to make sure that all the information we need to enroll children, maybe from 6 years after they were born, we will have all that access to all that information and use it in making good decisions for the country. So within Africa, we need to have access to information. We need to manage the information properly, and we need to use the information responsibly. That's the only comment I would like to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Margaret. The rest of us, please, let's hold on to that because of network in Nigeria. We'll take the next presentation, but I know these discussions will have to pick it up from his presentation because I know it's giving us lots of thoughts and discussions to pick and compare if we actually need telecommunication, and in cases where there's no telecommunication, what are the best practices which can adopt for good governance as professionals. If Dr. Goodness Osha is in the house, may just introduce him as a senior lecturer, Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Babcock University, Nigeria. Is talking about indigenous knowledge production and governance in Africa. Please, in the house, sir, if you're ready. Dr. Jeremiah, is he right there?
Yes, he is ready. I'm here now.
Okay, please proceed, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. I will be sharing my screen right now. I am very delighted to be here talking to Africa, and I like what you are doing. I am from the political science background, and I will be making my presentations in this regard. Of course, what you do for Africa is interdisciplinary discourse. I will say thank you very much, Nerissa, for the good work, and I say keep it up. I also thank my colleague and friend, Dr. Obinna Okoro, on whose platform I'm also riding on. I would say, sorry, because I would have presented earlier, but I had some technical issues on my system. What I'm discussing here is indigenous knowledge production and good governance in Africa. I would build the background by saying that Africa is enormously blessed with rich culture. And of course, before colonization, Africa nationalities were already going places and well managing themselves. But a lot of things changed over time. And somehow technology is, and westernization is taking over our governance system, our knowledge system. And that is why emphasis here is placed on indigenous knowledge production for governance in Africa. We have a quote here that we cannot be mere consumers of good governance. We must be participants. We must be co-creators. For Africa to move forward, for Africa to have good governance, we are not only going to copy and paste European models. We need to be active players in the game. And that is why we want to place emphasis. Here, we are wanting, we have set out to find what is actually governance. And we make bold to say that governance is the process of interactions through law. Go to this. Okay. Sorry, that governance is the process of interaction through laws
That's fine. You're muted, sir. Please unmute yourself. Doctor, please unmute yourself. You're muted. Thank you.
All right. We are talking about indigenous knowledge production and governance in Africa. And I am saying that before westernization and foreign knowledge and governance system was introduced to Africa, that the various ethnic groupings and societies were well organized with advanced knowledge and good governance structure. But for the westernization, which has to an extent overtaken our indigenous knowledge and governance, it is important that a forum like this will place emphasis on our roots, the indigenous knowledge. And that is why I am talking about it from the political science perspective. So I have raised a quote here that we cannot Obina, how do I share this slide? Okay, well.
Okay.
All right. We cannot be mere consumers of good governance. We must be participants. We must be co-creators. For Africa to move forward, we should not just be gullible. We should not just take whatever westernization has given to us. For us to have good governance, we need to be active players. I have asked, what is governance? And governance here is conceptualized as the process of interactions through the laws, norms, power, or language of an organized society over a social system. It is done by the government of a state. Now, since we are talking about good governance as a principal theme, we are saying that governance is the sum of the variety of ways of individuals and institutions, public and even private, how they manage their common affairs. It is a continuing process through which conflicting or diverse interests may be accommodated and cooperative action taken. And of course, this definition of governance, and of course good governance, is provided by the Commission on Global Governance in 1995. The rationale for good governance is its emphasis on combating corruption, nepotism, bureaucracy, mismanagement, and the need for greater transparency, accountability, and proper procedures. Of course, Africa is in dire need of good governance. Some features of good governance: there must be participation. All the people, men and women, should have a voice in decision-making, either directly or through legitimate intermediate institutions that represent their interests, the parliament and all of the representative systems that may be adopted by such a system. The other feature of good governance is transparency. And of course, transparency is built on the free flow of information, processes, institutions, and information directly to be accessible to those concerned. And enough information is provided or should be provided to understand and to monitor the structure. Good governance is not shrouded in secrecy. Good governance is open for everyone to be aware of what goes on and at every given time. We have also identified strategic vision as a key feature of good governance. And of course, the leaders and the public should have a broad and long-term perspective of what the government or this system is set out to do. And of course, this will have to do with human development and all other forms of development. There is also the understanding of the historical, the cultural, and the social complexities in which that perspective is grounded. So participation, transparency, and strategic visions are features of good governance. The other leg of this study is knowledge. And of course, knowledge is the awareness of facts and practical skills. And this may also refer to the familiarity with objects and situations. Again, we would say that knowledge involves facts, information, and skills acquired through experience or education, the theoretical and practical understanding of a particular subject. This is a general conception of knowledge. Because we have placed some emphasis here on indigenous knowledge. And of course, I built the background that before the Europeans, the various African structures were well organized and transferred experience from one generation to another. And for us in Africa, our method was very unique. Through folklore, through norms and religions and values and our culture. The way we dress tells exactly where somebody comes from, what he is capable of doing. Today, a lot of things have changed, but if we place emphasis on indigenous knowledge, it will bring us back to a good platform. Of course, indigenous knowledge provides evidence of existence of members of a community. It gives identity. Every society is to be known for its uniqueness in culture, their religion, their values, and of course, their norms. And so when we swallow Europe westernized way of life, hook, line, and sinker, we bury the volume of wealth that we are endowed with. Of course, indigenous knowledge can be transferred through songs, through folklore, like I said before, through laws, rituals, religion, legends, acts, and culture. For us to understand actually the relevance or place the relevance of knowledge and good governance, we have looked at some characteristics provided by the United Nations to measure good governance. And there are 8 indicators. These include participation, the rule of law, transparency, responsiveness, consensus oriented, equity, and inclusiveness. Of course, we have effectiveness and efficiency and accountability. Knowledge to improve governance must be aimed at improving all of these. How can indigenous knowledge production improve good governance? We need to hold on to the fact that the knowledge that is produced transmitted in Africa is equal and even more than Western knowledge. I'll give you an instance from the Nigerian various ethnic nationalities in Nigeria. The Yoruba ethnic group is one of the major ethnic groups in Nigeria. And of course, the Yorubas have a way of enthroning the leadership. They have a system where, of course, with due consultations, they will consult from the royal families and select. In this process of selection, there are characteristics that is expected of this leader. And when he fails, the people will present him a calabash with bitter cola. And that is to say that your government is no more acceptable. That is a system to check and balance authoritarianism. It is expected that the leaders, the Oba, should be a servant of the people, should not be lord over the people. And so at the point where he is becoming too authoritarian, the people will reject his government. Today, we talk about Western democracy as though the Africans were not ruling themselves even better. I think that because we have swallowed Westernization, the African society is not developing faster than it should even develop, because our various cultures have ingredients that of course cover all of those identified characteristics by the United Nations. So we are saying that in Africa, we still have what it takes, and we should emphasize this as much as possible. Again, looking at the modern times, and of course, we cannot remain in the past. We are saying that for us to move forward, and as an aspect of good governance, there is institutional development. Of course, in institutional development, it is engaging all the parts and levels of government. This is very, very important. That is to say that without effective and accountable, inclusive institutions at all levels, whether at the village level, whether at the district level, whether at the national level, all of those must be part of it. There cannot be progress if the leadership, if the governance structure is bad, and if the elements are not found. Of course, we are saying that knowledge is very, very important in this direction. We need to have good policies that will help in the development of the identified way that we want to lead our society forward. Of course, we will also place emphasis on skills development. All of these are necessities if we must talk about good governance. Of course, electoral education is very important in our society today. We have placed emphasis on democracy. And if we place emphasis on democracy, then we must talk about elections. And then we should talk about electoral education. Most African countries are going through electoral processes today. Elements of good governance include that the electorate should be well informed of what they want to do, select the right people, and not just to select institutions, not just to select parties, but to select and elect people who have what it takes to move the society forward. And of course, this is to say that the society itself should set agenda. What is the agenda of the African society, of the African states? If there is no agenda, then it makes it difficult to hold somebody accountable. Accountability is very, very important. Unfortunately, most African states are living on rent and not just on tax. And that has made it very difficult to even hold the leaders accountable. So we also advance that the African society should live on tax, not just living on rent. Of course, it is when we pay our tax that we can ask government to account for how they are using it. It is at that point that we can kick against authoritarianism and every form of bad governance. Of course, being in the 21st century, we must say that there is need for technological advancement. We cannot remain backward. We need to key into the technology. But unfortunately, Africa seems to be so gullible. We hardly produce these technological, we are not key players in technology. We are much of consumers. And we are saying that it is proper that we also key into technological development. So how do we make knowledge more accessible? We have also provided some discussions on this, and we're saying that it is better for us to emphasize educational development at all levels, male and female, and our education should not just be copy and paste education. It should be education that is skill tilted. We should not just be theoretical, but it should be more practical. So educational development is important. And of course, good governance and development in a knowledge-based society is our next. And we have looked at it here, and all of those that we have said, we should follow the rule of law, we should be accountable, we should be transparent, and of course, there should be equitable and inclusive participation of everyone. There should be responsibility on all parts of the society, both in leadership and in the followership. Of course, knowledge should lead to improved systems, and improved systems should lead to good governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. That's extremely informative. And I like the part that you're married the African leadership and especially the issue of taxes and rent. And I'm sure the Kenyans in the House will allude that this is the direction we want to take. Like, can we survive on taxes as Africa? I'll open the floor for now questions for both presentations. And the only person I'll give permission to cut across, if he's here, is His Excellency the Ambassador. Are you in the House? Ambassador? Excellency Ambassador Kayama, are you in the House? The Ambassador is not here. I'll open the floor to any other person for both questions or questions for the two doctors. Please use the emoji if you have a question. And to see the emoji. And as you prepare questions, I've seen quite a number of new faces in the House. As you prepare questions, let me acknowledge Mali Shokoba. Would you want to say hi to the meeting, Mali? Shokoba Mali.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
I'm Suleiman Sogoba, and I'm Malian, and I'm an information manager of the planning and statistics unit of rural developments, and I work as an associate editor at a directory of open access journals to facilitate the integration of Francophone journals in open access. You have a great session.
Thank you. And for the rest of us colleagues, Mali, including Senegal, has been requesting if we can have an interpreter so that we incorporate the Francophone countries of Africa, but we are looking into that as the team from Information Africa. The other person I would want to, is Senegal in the house? Acknowledge Morocco, South Africa. So that you take the questions, their faces, if you're missing the first shot. If your face was missing, please switch on your video so that you don't miss out that shot, and then I'll take questions. Videos, please switch on your videos. For those who were not on the first screenshot, and if you're there also, please switch it on again. Faith, switch on your videos, please quickly, so that you take questions for the two presenters. Dr. Goodwill, please, we want you to sit down. We want your face. Videos on. Grace, Kenya. Wilson, Namibia. Page 2. Faces, Winnie, Kenya. Tandike Swatini. Faces before you take the questions. There's a line here. Margaret.
You're saying only those who did
No,
not attend.
everybody. Margaret, your face is half. Please. If your face was missing in the first shot, please want to get a shot with the ambassador in the house. Okay, I'm waiting for Margaret to settle, then we take the shot. Vitalis, Kenya, your video, please. So I think
Sorry, Marisa, I'm still having a problem with my camera. It's not seeing my face.
Wait, see your face. You've just gone off again. Your face was
Oh,
there.
you did?
Yeah.
You did?
I saw your face.
Oh, wow. Okay, let me
you've
come
gone.
back.
It's gone. It's gone now. Yeah. It's about to come. Please adjust.
What is it doing now? No.
Now.
Yeah.
So just put your face there. Are we ready for the screen?
Do you see my?
Yeah. Now I've seen you, but you've gone again for just the last.
I've gone again.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, that's fine. Page 1. Guess of the next page. If you're missing on the first page, please put up you wear a smile. You don't have a smile. You don't have a smile. Thank you, faces. Thank you, beautiful faces of Africa. We're moving to the question session for the two presenters, and any other question picking from the ambassador's presentation. So opening the floor for the two, and I'll request the two presenters, if there are questions which come to your side, please have them, record them. Then we're taking sets of 2-2s. Questions, if you're directing questions to Dr. Goodwill, please indicate. And if you're directing questions to Dr. Zole of Lesotho, please indicate. Let's go fast questions. I want to get questions from Kenyans, especially in the last presentation, because it was touching on governance, and we've just come out from elections. So I don't know, Vitalis, if you have a question, if you listened in to the presentation. Vitalis, you're muted. Vitalis, you're muted. Vitalis, you're muted. Vitalis, you can hear me? Okay, you can't hear me. Please unmute yourself, Vitalis. We want to get your question. Priority Kenyans, because you just came from elections, and it's a lesson for the Nigerians because you're going in for elections. Vitalis, you're muted.
Yeah, maybe
you.
not now. My net is very unstable. I will ask later, please.
Okay, but you have a comment based on the discussion. It's not only questions, you could also have a comment based on what has been shared. There another opportunity for the Kenyans in the house. A Kenyan in the house, please put up your hand, and then I'll take it to Namibia. Dr. Wilson, are you in the house for questions? Dr. Wilson, Namibia. Muted, you're muted. Dr. Wilson, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, please. Thank you. Please, you can make your contributions and then ask questions to both the presenters if you have any.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I don't have much to say today. It was very good presentation so far. Probably my comment will probably go to both presenters so that they can help us maybe understand some of the importance of indigenous knowledge systems that we are trying to promote. As we know, we are quite a big, diverse community on our continent. All the knowledges are having good aspects that can help us to survive on this continent. But now the question that probably comes to mind now, how can we, maybe the presenters touched a bit on it, as I see the first one talked about cultural compatibility, which he actually also further said that does not mean similarities, but the question is, how are we gonna take, or probably what examples do you have that you can explain to us where these compatibilities were tried, brought together and integrated and started working towards some progress in our development approaches, for example. And this also goes to the second presenter who also supported IKS, Indigenous Knowledge Systems, which is our concern. Even me, my research is around indigenous knowledge systems, how we can promote them, but also how to bring them together to talk to each other so that we have some systems in place that can help the development process. Because sometimes we come at a point where we clash because we are not compatible. But then we don't go beyond that to try and find a solution to say, okay, let's tackle it this way, the other group come this way, let's meet here and combine it here and go forward. So what I want from the presenters is maybe to come up with examples. I know the second one alluded to some good governance approaches from indigenous knowledge systems, but how can we take those individual examples, bring them together? What examples do we have or experience do we have where we tried them out and say, guys, we have been probably surviving on a borrowed, imported Western leadership system, but we have our own different ones here on the continent. How do we bring them together and start promoting them, and so that they can also influence our governance systems at the current point? That's probably my own concern that I'm also trying to research on, and maybe the presenters can also elaborate a bit on it. How to bring these differences, diverse differences together. We know in Africa we have some commonalities, and probably sometimes we are missing them and focusing on the differences, and then we stay in our own corners while we have commonalities. So thank you very much. That's all I could add and probably ask at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll take another set of questions again from the southern parts of Africa. Eswatini. Namsa, or do you want to raise or add your questions to the two presenters? Then from South Africa, we'll move to East and then we go to West. Namsa?
Thank you, Nerissa. So far, I got in late, so I'm still just trying to follow up on the presentations. But so far, from what I have gotten from the two presenters here, it is really giving us an insight on the importance of even managing the indigenous knowledge that, because one of your presenters from Nigeria, I think, was talking about the significance of knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and how we were affected by the Europeans and the like. So I'm thinking that looking into what is going on around these presentations are actually giving us a great idea in the form of the significance of knowledge management. It's quite interesting that I just also started teaching the foundation of knowledge management where I am, and I am just learning a lot, that there's so many aspects of knowledge management and indigenous knowledge and the like. So thank you for the platform, Nerissa.
Thank you. Before you take the questions, those are just comments. Let me pick a question from the eastern part. But first, I don't know if you have a question or comment, so that I would pick the response and then we take the next set. But first in the house, Kenya.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a question or comment to the two presenters?
Basically, I don't have a question because the moderators were, the speakers were, they elaborated well on the issue of knowledge management. I think the major thing I've just learned, because I'm new in information knowledge management, is just I've understood that it is an important aspect in the development growth in Africa. I think that's the major thing I really understand about knowledge management. Thank you.
Thank you. Another Kenyan with a question. Those are comments, because I want to take two sets of questions to the presenters. Yes, Regina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the part of good governance, I want to ask Dr. Ida, Goodness Osa, I think I've pronounced well. What's your take about when you talk of good governance in relation to knowledge impact? Do you think it's wise to have leaders who are well endowed knowledge-wise, who are learned? At times politics is about who can do what to the society. But what's your take in terms of electing leaders who have qualifications, let's say bachelor's and above? Because when you have qualifications in education, then you can be able to understand some aspects like this knowledge management and other essentials. And on the aspect of nominating particular leaders in sectorial parts, like now in my country, we have people we call the cabinet secretaries. If we put the wrong person in the cabinet of education, then a lot cannot be impacted, because we are putting the wrong personnel in terms of what do I owe them, instead of what can they bring on the table for the bigger forum. So what's your take on that aspect, so that to avoid being judged wrongly, like being biased towards a particular area? Because I think that really affects hugely when it comes back to impacting or making everything work in terms of the knowledge aspect and other areas. So in terms of education wise, politically, I know we have maybe politicians here, we have people who have friends who are politicians, but should we have learned people as politicians, or we are going to assume politicians should be leaders, whether with or without books?
That is a Kenyan coming from political scenario. Just concluded our cabinet the other day, and I'm glad it's going to Dr. Goodwell, because he comes from the political side of the academia. Dr. Goodwell, please respond to that and the IK system question. After your response, we also expect to get response from Dr. Sole on the IK systems, and then we'll take questions from the western part of Africa.
All right, thank you. For the last question by Regina, I would say that education is important. Education is important, and unfortunately, for most the African states. We have put the wrong pegs in the right holes. Of course, we are saying that people should be properly placed. Somebody who is not well educated will not conceive policies that will bring about development. So yes, we place emphasis on education, but beyond the education, Africans look for integrity. We look for character. So there should be a balance. We should not just place all our emphasis on paper qualification. We should place emphasis on morals. We should place emphasis on historical antecedents. We should place emphasis on values. So I say that knowledge is important, education is important. I mean, education is important, but we should rightly place it. Of course, what we have are politicians, and of course, one of the conceptions of politics is what Harold Laswell says, that it is about who gets what, when, and how. And of course, that is to say that politics, one of the things that politicians do is resource allocation. And most of these times, they are interest, personal specifics. They are not interested in the public. They are just interested in their own personal interest. And so they may have the best educational qualification, but that is not what we are looking for. We are looking for people who will serve us. And that is what our indigenous structure projected. The African system abhorred corrupt people. It abhorred authoritarian people in all of the African cultures. And so I say that while we place emphasis on education, Western education is good, but does not have all the characteristics that we have. Now, let me just make a little deviation, and I should not be misunderstood. Most of the time when our leaders win elections and are sworn into power, for us in Nigeria, what they do is that we present to them the Bible, if they are Christians. If they are Muslims, we present them with the Quran. They have it in their hand, and they swear that they will keep to it, and as well as the Constitution. But unfortunately, they don't. I belong to one of the religions, but we are saying that the Bible and the Quran has failed in holding our leaders, making our leaders accountable. And on a lighter mode, we are saying also that the African traditional religions should also be part of the tools with which they will be sworn in. And of course, you know that most of the African gods act very fast when you disobey. And of course, it's because they know that the westernized religions are not as quick as most of the African gods. And that is why we are saying that while we balance modernization, while we balance what we copy, I mean, why we consume what we copy, there should be a balance. And once people know that we have to go back to our roots, I feel that they will serve the public better. That is to the question of Regina. We should place emphasis on education, but education is not all. And then for the other question, I still say that Africa is blessed with rich culture, with rich governance system, and which we should not just ignore. We should also go back to our roots. As our leaders have won elections and we win elections, Nigeria is on the March to 2023, we are saying that we don't want leaders anymore who are interested in reaching their empires, but leaders who will reach out to the people. And that's just what I will answer to the other questions. So we should also explore our indigenous governance systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sola, would you have add your comment on the question from Dr. Wilson of Namibia on IK systems? Dr. Sola.
Nerissa, I don't know if I missed the question, but if the question can please be asked again.
Dr. Wilson in the house? Dr. Wilson? Namibia. Please rephrase your question. The first question for Dr. Selo.
Yeah, it was just the question of compatibility and not similarities. What I wanted to emphasize is that we might have some examples existing on the continent where even where groups are not compatible, but things have been brought together. So I wanted to maybe for presenters also to touch on that, because I think their research is based around such issues where groups, different ethnic groups come together and use systems to move forward for development purposes. But there are, as we know, with indigenous knowledge systems, we have some points where we clash, where we differ. Maybe, for example, in the use of certain resources that might be sacred for one group and not sacred for the other group. So those things can lead to some conflicts. But what I wanted to know is that maybe during your research, you came across examples where these communities came together and resolved these issues to move forward. Because I just remarked that it's probably one of those differences and that can lead to conflicts if not properly understood, properly translated, and then it can lead to unnecessary conflicts and unnecessary hampering development projects. So there was just a comment in that line. If you have some maybe examples that you experienced where these non-compatible or these compatibility issues were handled and then people moved forward. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Wilson. Just to be straightforward in answering your question, in my research, I never really come across such an issue. But just to repeat what I meant in as far as cultural compatibility is concerned, was to say that, of course, in the context of organizations merging, in case where they are from different countries, hence the usage of cross border. It's not that the cultures needs to be similar, but it's about whether or not those cultures can actually be combinable, can be combined in order. So the issue here was to say that a lot of researchers have found that culture happens to be the inhibiting factor in as far as knowledge management or knowledge retention is concerned. So the point where I came from was that, of course, there are different views. But what we concluded was that, yes, cultures may not need to be similar. However, what is important is whether or not they can be, whether or not the management of two organizations can be able to combine them together. I don't know if I made myself clear. Can you imagine, for instance, it's almost impossible that cultures of two organizations merging, one being from the other country, that they can actually be similar. But what's important is to note, for instance, remember I also talked about the issue of cultural due diligence, to make sure that certain cultural aspects are taken into consideration to make sure that those cultures can actually be combinable or can be combined in order to actually bridge that gap between them.
Thank you. Thank you for responding more. I'll take another 2 sets of questions from the eastern part and north, and then we move to West Africa. Somaliland, Faisal in the house, do you have a comment, a question? To represent the extreme end of East Africa.
I'm good. I don't have any questions. I'm good.
Thank you. Egypt, towards the north. Egypt, do you have a question? Dr. Iman, Egypt. Do you have a question?
Thank you. Thank you. Just I wanted to say that all presentations are awesome and amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I take the question session to the extreme west. Mali, do you have a question or a comment to the presentation? With the understanding that your English is not extremely good, we appreciate that you're also able to join. Sokba.
Okay, my question is, what is the role of information managers in fighting corruption and building good governance? I repeat.
I think it's taken role of information managers in fighting corruption and good governance, right? Did I get it right? Mali, Sokba. That's one question. I'll take a second question so that the presenters can respond. And that question on the role of information managers, when we'll be picking questions from Nigeria, I'll indicate also colleagues, senior colleagues in their profession who can also help in responding, especially those from the teaching fraternity. Okay, Ghana. I cannot see Dr. Florence. I think Dr. Margaret already, you had passed your question. Do you want to pass another question?
No, I think I'll pass it on for now.
Thank you. So give us a role, then we pick Nigerians in the house. You'd want to go first, Dr. Solo? I love this platform. I've murdered all names and I'm forgiven for wrong pronunciations for all the names. Dr. Solo in the house? Coming from the, yeah, please talk about the role of information professionals or information managers in governance.
Okay, I think before we even try to talk about the role of information or knowledge professionals, we need to be sure of what their work entails. Then I think automatically we will understand how their work can actually help in fighting corruption. First of all, information professionals, their role is to make sure that there's knowledge, there's information stroke knowledge, because I gather from the comment that the person who asked uses them interchangeably, but that is not the topic for now. But their role is to make sure that first there's information, that information is stored in a proper way, that information can easily be accessible. And of course, it also says that that information can easily be used whenever it's needed. So, but it's not the work of information professionals to expose corruption. Theirs is just to make sure that information that is required to expose corruption is readily available. I think I answered the question.
Yeah. Thank you. Would you want to add on to that from a political perspective? Doctor, you're muted.
Well, everyone in the society is to fight corruption. In one of the Asian countries, I think in the last 2 weeks, a foremost leader was sentenced to death for engaging in high-level corruption because they have that as their culture. If the African states would also imbibe that, and of course, in the indigenous systems, corruption was seen as an anathema. It was abhorred. So the information managers, as well as everyone in society, is to be involved in fighting corruption. I don't think it is limited to anyone. However, we could also say that the information managers should create awareness. They should make information available. And I think if they do that, they would have also done their part. It's not their duty to prosecute, but at least as members of the society, we all join hands to fight bad governance. And of course, corruption is an indication, an indices of bad governance.
Thank you. Before I ask the Nigerians to respond, to ask the questions, Moloko, are you in the house? Moloko, South Africa. Knowing that you work for a political party. South Africa, do you have a question? You're in the house. Moloko, South Africa.
Yes, I think he has responded on the chats.
Oh, she's Moloko. I want specifically Moloko because she works for a political party in South Africa.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is
Hi,
she's
hi,
here.
Dorothy.
Yeah.
Hi, Dorothy.
Can you tell us the political party you work for?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm busy preparing for we are going to have a press conference soon because our president is supposed to head to court tomorrow.
Who's your
You
president?
know, it's Venus Malema, the commander-in-chief. So yeah, I can't able to talk much. That is why I'm trying to chat on the yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Regina, I didn't see that. So from there, of course, I was going to pick on Professor Wole, and I'm glad he's put up his raised up his hand. And also coming from the teaching fraternity, I would expect that apart from you raising your additions and comments, you'd also give us a direction for information professionals. Professor Wole. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. I may not be able to show my face because of my camera.
Okay.
But first of all, I want to appreciate the Information Africa Organization for this beautiful session that we are having. And my comments goes to the last presentation majorly, which was on indigenous production and governance in Africa. I'll make some comments, then I'll react to some of the issues that have been raised earlier. Now, when you talk about the issue of indigenous, you say indigenous knowledge production. First of all, we need to conceptually know what indigenous knowledge is all about, which some literature have defined as being knowledge systems that have shaped people's way of life and enabled communities to live in balance with the environment and nature. And the literature has noted that with the onset of Western knowledge systems and way of life, indigenous knowledge is in danger of disappearing from the knowledge store of Africa. So apart from IK, the threat of disappearing due to commercial value and importance to biodiversity, Africa's knowledge stocks are being appropriated by outsiders who are patenting it without the owners, the owners of IK, benefiting from its commercialization. So largely, IK in Africa and even beyond rests on oral tradition. Oral tradition. You know, it was when the Westerners came, they had nothing to read about us. That was why they branded us, Africans, that they said a lot of unprintable things about us. And it was what they wrote about us that the whole world now believes. So oral tradition in Africa is a very, very large area of research. And that is what in presentations like this, we should first of all give definition to it. And our discussion should also center on how to preserve oral tradition in the context of Africa, such that in the developmental equation, Africa will have something to contribute rather than we basing our governance on what even the Westerners have actually recommended. Because the last speaker mentioned that we should go to indigenous governance system. That is Dr. Jeremiah. I was wondering what kind of indigenous government system are we talking about? Is it not through democracy that is actually Western in its orientation also? So when you look at the context of Africa, because of Westernization, many things that has to do with oral tradition in Africa are being phased away. There's reluctance of young people to learn old ways, reduction of our traditions by the young people, encroachment of modern ways of life. You know, in Africa, it's a death of an IK holder can result in the end of an entire tradition and knowledge system. So what we should be looking at is how to document, how to preserve our indigenous knowledge system. Now, coming back to the question of what role do we have, these information professionals, what role do we play? A lot of roles. First of all, we talk about there is need for educational framework so that the content of our curriculum in schools, information professional can push for it that content of educational curricula, they are rooted in indigenous knowledge systems. Also, information, you know, in some, for example, now in some cultures, in some homes, language is very linked to indigenous knowledge system. You have situations where some homes, some parents, they have banned their children from even speaking about speaking the native language, banning native language in their homes. That are, you know, these are areas where we are getting it wrongly, because language is part of culture, and language linked to culture is what gives us indigenous knowledge we are talking about. You know, we are the language of colonialism. Even in this forum, that is what we are using to communicate, because we have been made to see that our local languages, they are nothing to write home about. And when you want to kill a people, just rob them of their language. So educational advocacy is there. Also, what information professionals can do is policy framework, pushing for policies to be made to recognize indigenous knowledge in science, in research that we do, through the education, through even the media. These are some things that could do. There should be also what we call the legal framework. Legislation is very important in enabling indigenous knowledge systems to thrive on our continent. So pushing government to see the need to legislate on the need to recognize, the need to document, the need to preserve indigenous knowledge systems in Africa. So these are some of the issues which I believe, because we are talking about knowledge management. What is knowledge itself? How do we define the knowledge we are talking about here? So at the last presenter, I said, indigenous knowledge, we must be in this forum, we must be in the vanguard of pushing for a recognition of indigenous knowledge, our own local knowledge to be documented, indigenous knowledge to be preserved, so that Africa will have something to contribute, rather than using Western modes of life, Western modes of doing virtually everything to actually do what we can apply our own indigenous knowledge to handle I think on this note, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to contribute at this forum. Thank you, Nerissa.
Thank you so much, Prof. When we talk about preservation of indigenous knowledge in Africa, I would also have expected you to tell us what happens to the African taboos, because we have quite a lot of, we believe a lot of taboos in Africa that yes, we want to preserve, but then what happens to what my community holds? Then also the holders of indigenous knowledge in Africa, the communities, the families who have it, are they willing to share it out? I think those are things we'll keep discussing in future as we work towards documentation. I don't think you had a question. I'll take the next person from Nigeria for a question. I acknowledge Kolawala, I know you came in late, you may not have a question. Is Dr. Jeremiah in the house? Dr. Jeremiah of IRM department, is it the same line with what you're using, Dr. Osa?
Yes, Dr. Osa is using the system.
Yeah, I've changed it, but I can see the department. I can see the department is on, so I thought it's right here. It's not here, right? I wanted it to
No, I think the IRM will be used by probably Dr. Madukoma. I think so.
So I don't know if Madukoma is in the house, if they have a comment or a question to add. If Dr. Madukoma is not here, the other Nigerian in the house, now that the presentation is from home. Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith, if you have a question, direct it to either of the presenters and or your comments on the discussions.
Well, I want to say well done to the two presenters. I have comments for the two and questions. I will start with Dr. Zielu. Well done for the good presentation. And you discussed about differences in culture. I believe when you talk of culture, is from individual background. That is where an adage comes that says charity begins at home. It is the culture that is imbibed from the childhood that the person will hold on to the adulthood. And it is very culture that one will display in all activities. In talking about the organization, I believe is different individual from different places that merge together to form an organization. And it's within them that the culture of organization would be formed. If this should be the case, merging together of different culture will definitely bring a controversy among the people in the organization. And when we are talking about recognizing any culture that is causing problem in an organization and removing it out of other culture, when we figured out the differences, there may still be controversy. And this can generate problem in an organization. Now, I want to ask Dr. Zielu, as you have said, that when differences in culture recognized and the people in the organization filtered out the culture that are not genuine to the organization. Do you think the other people that their own culture is adopted would, and I mean, the people that their own culture is not adopted, we'll be happy with the organization that adopts their own culture in order to satisfy the culture that are feel in good. Do you think they will not see it as a bias towards the culture that you neglect? That is my question to Dr. Siolu. Secondly, to Dr. Jeremiah in Nigeria.
Not Dr. Jeremiah, Dr. Osha.
Dr. Osha,
yeah,
in Nigeria. Dr. Goodness Osha in Nigeria.
Yes.
Well done, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
For the well done job.
Yeah.
So we talking about the indigenous people. We all know that they are local and they had the honor of the land. Before the Western civilization, indigenous people have been in existence. They believe in their own local way, and they are organizing themselves towards the knowledge that has been laid down according to the forefathers. But this Western culture are changing things on the indigenous knowledge. Before your presentation, in assertion of the second presenter, he talked about the innovation in organization, and he made mention of robots. And I let him realize that this robot operating we are talking about is new innovation in ICT. Even people that are of this very Western knowledge are not all capable of using these very robots we're talking about. Talk less of local people. When discussing such a thing, there's supposed to be a way of incorporating the indigenous people into organization. Now, in your presentation, sir, you discussed about transparency, participation, and responsiveness. In organization, if the organization really wants to achieve the aims and objectives, there is need to carry along the local people. And in carrying along the local people, we need to listen to them. We need to understand their language. We need to understand their needs. And we need to put their decision into our objectives so that the governments can achieve aims of serving the society at large without bias towards the lower people as they regard them. Furthermore, in decision making, we know the local people have more knowledge than these Western people we're talking about. And they have knowledge of the indigenous. If there's going to be good governance in any states of any African countries, the inclusive of the indigenous people are very, very paramount to be successful in any organization. Let me move on to the political issue you are talking about. When we are talking about political, it is not meant for people that have knowledge of only Western culture. It's to match the knowledge of both indigenous and the local and the Western culture together. They have knowledge. They are very good in intuition. They can have the value of the society. But before that can be recognized or before that can be adopted, it is when we call them and have discussion with them on what they think we can include in planning of the government that can extend to both the poor and the rich, and that can make them to be more open to what is happening in the society, so that this can even be transmitted to their own children. And the governance, good governance we are talking about can be realized. So my question is, Dr. Noah, please, how do you think the governments can incorporate the indigenous people into the programs, be it meeting, planning of the state in Africa, in order to ensure good governance that we are talking about in knowledge management? Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think or the knowledge culture, I want to think, of course, the presenter will talk about, I want to think it's to do with the organizational culture. So perhaps it's not specifically a tribe, it's a culture which is adapted within an organization. So that I would want to, why should I want to be a student, say, or work at Lead City University as opposed to working at Babcock University? I'll ask Dr. Sowell to go first. And as you do it, please do your final wraps on your presentation. Then I'll ask Dr. Osha to also respond and do the wraps, and we'll give the next direction. Dr. Sola.
Thank you very much, Nerissa and Dr. Subat. I hope I pronounced it well, from Nigeria. And from her question or comment, there are two issues that I gathered. And number one is that whenever two organizations meet or merge, particularly in the context of the cross-border measure, cultural differences are bound to exist. And yes, that is most likely to happen. Point number two that she raises relates to the point where one group in a specific organization may feel aggrieved because their culture is being sidelined in favor of the other one. I also agree, hence the proposed framework in my research, which is intended to kind of work out those differences, not to abolish them completely, because that is almost impossible, but to kind of bridge that gap. Like I showed on my presentation, the framework composes of 4 elements or concepts. Number one being cultural due diligence, formulation of the cultural integration plan, the implementation of cultural integration plan, as well as monitoring of cultural integration. So those 4 elements or concepts are brought together in order to bridge that cultural gap or differences, with the aim of retaining knowledge in those merging organizations. I would end here and wonder if I made myself clear.
Thank you, that was clear. Dr. Osha, if you have comments and your final submission for this session.
All right, thank you very much. I agree with Professor Wole, who emphasized on documentation and preservation of the indigenous knowledge. I would say that you are very right, sir. One, Professor Tony Falola is very active in organizing scholars to assemble and document some of the major aspects of the Yoruba culture. And I wish that every other other persons would join in developing and preserving their own indigenous cultures. I would also say that for my sister, Subiat, thank you very much. There is no need to be afraid. Before the coming of the whites, all indigenous groups had existed. And of course, in Nigeria, we have over 534 different ethnic nationalities. Nigeria is a heterogeneous society. And we had lived together, done businesses together. And so there is nothing new, there is nothing to be afraid. Of course, Nigeria, for instance, has 3 major ethnic nationalities: the Yoruba, the Igbo, and then the Hausa Fulani. We have lived together. Before the coming of the white man, we know that the Benin Empire, the Benin Kingdom, was well organized and extended far beyond the present day location. Of course, there was the Opopo Kingdom. There was what is it called? The Oyo Kingdom. There is also the Kanem Borno. So there was no problem, and each of them had leaders, organized leadership, organized way of ascending and dethroning anyone. What we are just emphasizing here is that if we place emphasis on our indigenous cultures, we will do ourselves more good than harm. Let's also say that even in the past, the issue of inclusiveness was there. Take, for instance, in the Yoruba structure, there was the Baale who was in charge of the village, and then there was the Oba who was in charge of a larger society. And so it was in all other African societies. Now, if we all join hands to begin this process of preservation, even from the family, we may be introducing another aspect of it. But if the family makes the children to speak the indigenous language, teach them the indigenous, our folklores, teach them our culture, it will go a long way. So even when we marry westernization, it will not swallow all that we have. As at present, I would say that westernization is gradually eating up, not gradual, is fastly eating up our indigenous structures. And until we wake up to realize that it is time for us to balance, we may have some issues. So I think that we need to do that. Of course, for instance, in Nigeria, the National Assembly even recognizes the 3 major languages, Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa, even to be spoken on the floor of the National Assembly, but unfortunately, that is not done. Even in Lagos State in Nigeria, at least on every Thursday, it is expected that the indigenous language should be spoken. So if we all join hands together, we will, to an extent, preserve this culture. If not, it will go extinct. And once we lose our culture, we will not have good governance in Africa because we have a peculiar governance system. And I think that is why we have issues, because we want to marry what we have borrowed and it cannot situate. So I feel that there should be a way that we can marry what we had and what we now operate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, it's a very interesting discussion. We're going to suspend the discussions to afternoon colleagues, I'm using the program from East African time, and from East African time, we're due to take a 1 hour break. So please, wherever you are, we're taking 1 hour break. To be back East African time, 3 p.m. West African time will be back at 1 p.m. and the other West South African will be back at 2 p.m. We still have one more presentation, and the afternoon session will be moderated by my colleague, Regina. Have a good lunch and see you at 3 o'clock East African time.
Thank you, Narisa.